Up, there you go. Yeah. All right. So, hi everybody. Great, thank you. It's the first time that I've been using this new technology. It's the whole new technology for me, the webinar stuff. So, apologies for the technical issues. So, hi, welcome. It's great to see you here. And I'm going to dedicate this webinar for some notes about Angular 20. I'm going to focus mostly on things that relate to things that I do every day. So I'm not going to cover everything that came out in Angular 20, only the things that I actually work with and that are somehow related to the courses. Obviously, if you guys have any topic that you want to raise, bring up, by all means, write in the chat, and we can chat about anything here. I've prepared a short presentation to begin with, but after that, it's a free Q&A, so feel free to bring up any topic. So, all right, so let's get started. Here we go. So Angular 20 came out about 2 weeks ago, and I know we all anticipated for a few specific features to be released, but I think Angular 20 was mostly about stability. It's about stabilizing a lot of the features. Not many new features were introduced. There are a few that came up, and they somehow managed to cause a little rumble with one of them. So let's get started by looking at some aspects and see what changed in each one of them. So the first one is signals, which is, of course, the most important part of the Angular Renaissance, which started about 3 years ago. So again, Angular 20 did not bring a lot of new things to the signal story. It's mostly about stabilization, and the most important thing in this version is the fact that the core APIs of signals were promoted to stable status. So that's the most important thing. If you work in places where they require that you only use features that are stable, then now you can join the story of signals and take part in it. Another important aspect of Angular 20 is resource APIs. Now, it started with Angular 19, actually. Sorry, it slowly evolved through the versions, through the minor releases between Angular 20 and Angular 19. And in Angular 20, most of the APIs went through a minor change. And that's basically the idea behind being an experimental feature. Experimental feature, it doesn't mean that it's buggy. It just means that the feature is not stable yet. It can change. The RFC is open for interpretations and changes. And as we'll see later on, the APIs themselves have changed, not dramatically, but changed a little bit. So if you went on board, if you started to develop your applications using the resource APIs in Angular 19, now you have to do some minor changes in order to migrate to Angular 20. The big news is that the zoneless change detection is no longer experimental. It's for preview. But let's talk about it a little bit. So one of the questions that I keep being asked in companies that I consult, should we move to zoneless application? And I have to say that personally, I'm not sure. Now, some applications I think should, but others shouldn't. One of the biggest things that's still missing in this signal story is the forms feature. Now, some of us thought that Angular 20 is going to bring up the signal forms. It's a feature that the guys at the team, in the Angular team, have been working on, and they just announced that they're formally working on this new feature. So I assume that it'll be released sometimes later this year, either in one of the minor releases or in the major release that's coming up in November. But this is the only feature that, despite the name, is non-reactive. Okay, reactive forms are not really reactive. So the value is reactive, but if you want to display errors, or if you want to display dynamic forms, something that changes depending on the values. If you want to add or remove controls, depending on whether you select a value in one of the other controls, then this is the sort of thing that you need change detection in order for the UI to be modified through. You can't just expect the zoneless change detection to detect that. And it's not immutable. So that means that the object actually changes, and you need some mechanism to detect these changes. So if you rely heavily on forms, then I think you should wait with going zoneless. But if your application is mostly about presenting dashboards or collect information without using forms, then you might be able to give it a try. But in any case, before the signal forms feature is released, I wouldn't go zoneless yet. It's a good thing to test your application with zoneless, but I don't think I should expect to work with it in production just now. Right. Now, resource APIs. Now, this is the big thing with Angular 19 and 20. Angular is, the team is really trying to give us an alternative to RxJS. And as an instructor, I have to say that not having to teach RxJS in classes is a major benefit. And I am trying to slowly adapt resources. And as I said, it changed a little bit in Angular 20. Some of the names of the properties changed, and also some of the functionality. For example, with promises. So the resource API depends on comes to bridge the gap between signals and promises. So it relies on promises. And one of the things that was added is the ability to stream. So what does it mean to stream? Sometimes when you work against some sort of asynchronous API, you only need to get one value. For example, when you work with RESTful APIs. But sometimes you need continuous values. For example, when you work with WebSockets. So now you can stream values. You can connect to a WebSocket and use the same resource in order to stream values. Rx resource, which works with observables, actually moved to streaming mode entirely. So you cannot use it to load one value anymore. It assumes that your observables are streaming information. Of course, if you work with HTTP client observables, then by nature, they only give you one value. So you're not really streaming. But as far as the API is concerned, the observables can stream. And if they don't complete, then it continues to listen to them. There's no longer the loader parameter. It changed to stream. So that's the major difference. Now, not so long ago, in version 19.2, I think, the HTTP resource was added. Now, HTTP resource is basically built on top of Rx resource with HTTP client. It's mostly targeted at simplifying things, okay? The syntax that you use when working with HTTP resource is much simpler than with the other two. Resource and Rx resource seems to be more lower level APIs, and the HTTP resource is higher level. And it's best suited for the most common and simple scenarios where you just want to go to a URL and fetch some values and not have to work too much with observables or promises. So the nice things about resource is that you don't really work with observables or promises, but behind the scenes, it works with the HTTP client. And it's a pretty important thing because that means that all your configuration is still relevant. So for example, if you work with HTTP interceptors, then they will actually take effect when you use a HTTP resource as well. Now, I've actually prepared a small demonstration for that. It's pretty small, but if you follow my courses, then you will be able to see the full demonstration there. So let's move to the demo. I'll just increase the size of the code so you'll be able to see better. So what you can see here, this is an application that loads book inventory from an HTTP API. And the HTTP API supports two types of APIs. It supports RESTful APIs, such as search and get. Now, this is only for reading information. You're not supposed to use resources for modifying it, only for reading. But you can either load information through HTTP RESTful calls or through a WebSocket. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that when you search, then you activate an API, obviously. So founder, I don't know. I'm not even sure what names exist, but yeah, all right, good. So we found 2 books. So this is obviously a RESTful API. You just send requests and they return values. Now, one of the nice things about the resource API is that it takes care of the is busy status. It handles errors, and it also takes care of cancellation. So if I'll open the network tab here, you can see that if I start to type, the requests that I do not want to wait for are actually actively canceled. So you don't bomb the server with irrelevant requests. And if your server is capable of canceling the search, then you save yourself from doing a lot of irrelevant work. So it's canceled client-side, but also in the communication layer. And another thing that you can see here is that we have a WebSocket connection. And that's because the API also gives you the ability to receive notifications about changes to the stock. So if I'll choose one book that actually has stock, then you can see that we keep receiving, and each 5 seconds we keep receiving notifications, and this is also supported by the resource API. And just to show you a little bit of code, so this is the service, the stateful service that manages the state through resource APIs. And we use things like HTTP resource, and you can see how easy it is. This is the code that performs the search. And that's it. That's all we need. So we send a request to a URL. We even supply the parameters as a different argument. And that's it. It gives us everything from busy state to error handling, everything you need. And this is the code that takes care of streaming the stock. And as you can see, we convert the WebSocket into observable, and you keep getting push notifications. So we use the RX resource for streaming. This is the easiest way to do it. And again, only a few lines of code. So this is really nice. All right. Now, of course, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat. I'm trying to follow your questions as well, as much as possible. Of course, I'm a guy, so my ability to do 2 things at the same time is pretty limited, but I'll try. All right. So, all right. Now, one of the questions that I keep being asked is, should we start using resources? Now, here, I think the situation is a little bit better. Even though all of the APIs are experimental, because as I said before, experimental doesn't mean that it's buggy. It just means that it can change. Now, if you have an application that already works, that uses the HTTP client with observables, with RxJS, but it works, then I'd wait. All right. There's no point in rushing to move to technology that is probably going to slightly change again. So there's no point in doing it right now. We can wait 1 version, and then when it becomes stable, then we can migrate. But if you're writing a whole new application, if you're beginning to develop something that from scratch, or if you're starting to work on a new module, a new feature, and you haven't written it already, then it makes sense to choose the resources, because I think the Angular team proved that resources is the way to go. This is they put a lot of effort in stabilizing the resource APIs and making them stable. I hardly believe, I don't think there's any chance that it will be removed. The worst case is that maybe it'll change slightly. So it's better to choose a technology that maybe will change and maybe not, than to choose a technology which is definitely not going to be in the mainstream anymore. And the resource APIs allow you to enjoy all the benefits of observables anyway, especially when you work with Rx resource. So you don't lose anything, but you do gain the fact that you start to use standard APIs that Angular is guaranteed to support in the future. So again, my answer is, if you work on new stuff, yes, start to adopt resources. And so that's basically it with Signals in the new version. what should we expect in the future? I think the most major developments in Angular 20, in the future of Angular, not necessarily 20, but in the next releases, is of course Signal Forms. Signal Forms is already in development. You can go to GitHub and see the open source and see what they're doing there. Actually, it's pretty fascinating to see what they do. And it's not ready yet. I hope it'll be ready in the next few months. Selectorless components is also something that's coming up, and I'll talk about it a little bit later in a few minutes. Now, regarding the course, the modern Angular 20 with Signals course has been updated a few days ago. I've added a pretty big section, 2.5 hours of discussion only about the resource APIs. It's the same demonstration that I just showed you, but of course we build it step by step. So there's a whole new section. So if you're in the course, if you're already subscribed to it, by all means, go ahead and see it. So if you want to go into the resource story, this should help you with that. And that's about signals. Now, the second topic that I want to mention is the signal store. The NGRX signal store is walking step by step along with Angular itself. They usually follow about 1 month behind, but no more. And there's actually been a pretty major release recently. This is the events feature. Now, if you worked in the past with NGRX store, the original store, the Redux global store, and you liked it, I know that not many people like it. It's too much code, a lot of boilerplate, but there is one nice thing about it that we kind of lost when we moved to the Signal store, and that's the ability to completely decouple the store from the method. In the Signal store, if you want to run a method, you need to go to the store itself. You need to know which instance of store you choose and run the method on it. Sometimes you want to just tell the world that something happened and that each store will change itself when that happens. For example, let's say that you have an application with 20 little stores, each handling a different feature, and you add an object that affects everything. Okay, let's say that your application is about courses and there's a new course. And all of the stores need to update themselves because of that. In that case, the new feature of NGRX Signal Store is for you. What it allows you to do, it allows you to dispatch an event instead of calling a method. And each store responds to that event by running some sort of reducer or effect in response to that. And the nice thing is that whoever dispatches the event doesn't even know what it affects. So this is really cool for large-scale applications with a lot of distributed stores. Honestly, I can't say that I know even one project that I'm currently part of that needs this, but maybe when the projects will grow, maybe sometimes in the future. So this is a new feature. And I know that for NGRX 20, which should be released in the next few weeks, they also plan to work on resource signals, on adding them to the signal store instead of using Rx methods for reactivity and asynchronous operations. I'm not exactly sure how it'll fit the story, but we'll just have to wait and see. And I do plan to add it to the course as soon as it released. So about events, I'm not so sure I'm going to add it soon, because usually I prefer to add things only after I've had some personal experience with them. But resource signals, as soon as it'll be released, it'll definitely get into the course as well. So that's the plans. Last but not least, Angular Material. Angular Material has, before I'll go to the new features, there are, you know what, let's talk about them a little bit. There are 2 new features in Angular Material 20, very small ones. One of them is about buttons, and you can actually see it. I've actually prepared a demo of the new feature. So these are the new buttons in Angular Material 20. Let me just go to the source code. And I think one of the interesting thing about it, one of the interesting things about this is the fact that we now have a new way to choose the type of button. In the past, we had different directives for different buttons. Now it's the same directive with a different input. So that's a new thing. And they added new values as well. So the tonal button is, instead of using the primary color, it uses a secondary color, which is like a more, a less saturated and more, it mixes the background a little bit in the color. So if you have a light theme, then it's lighter button. If you have a dark theme, then it's a darker button. So that's a change. There's also a few more changes, like a new card appearance. So if you work with cards, you have two appearances. So now in Angular 20, there's a third one, the filled appearance. So this is what it looks like, as opposed to the outline. But I think the most important thing about Angular Material is stability. And you know, if you saw Angular Material 19, the last thing you could say about it is stability, because in Angular Material 19, they broke everything. And a lot of people complained about the fact that when they want to migrate from previous versions of Angular Material to version 19, they had to rewrite some of their components. And I think it's actually a good thing. And I showed why I think it's a good thing in the course. They completely rethought about how to theme Angular Material and how to customize components. So in the past, if you want to customize components, you had to dig deep into the private styles of Angular Material and start to play around with things that you're not supposed to touch. And now you can actually customize and theme everything the way you want it without touching any private APIs and without doing things that will break in the next version. So that's a pretty good thing. The price we had to pay was that they broke everything one more time. So now people who adopt Angular Material 19 do have to work a little bit hard to do that, but it's a really good change, and I'm all in favor of that. And so I do not anticipate to change the course too much in the near future. I believe that after the major change of 19, there are probably not going to be groundbreaking changes in the near future. So that's it. Lastly, there are a few other changes that do not relate to any of the courses that I've had. For example, dynamic component with bindings. This is actually a feature, it's a pretty cool feature that actually relates a little bit to signals. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to bind, when you create dynamic components, for example, if we'll take this example, you can see here in the code that when we click this button here, we dynamically create a component programmatically and add it to this little square here. And we choose a component by random. And the new feature that was added is the ability to tie the inputs and outputs of the dynamically created component with signals from the outside world. So for example, here you can see that when I change the text, it is bound to the input of that component, and also the other way around. I'm actually using two-way binding here. So two-way binding. So you can receive notifications from the component that you've just dynamically created. So it is pretty cool. And you set it like this. You can also add directives, dynamic directives, the same way. So it's a pretty interesting change. And there is another thing that's coming up. Now, one of the changes in Angular 20 that broke havoc was the change in file names. There's a new style guide. All the names of the files have to change. So component, the extra extension, the .component or .service or .directive extensions are removed. And in fact, if you run ng-new and start a new project, all of your file names will be like this. The reason for that, what they're trying to achieve here, it's one step on the way to selectorless components. So why do we need selectorless components? So take a look at this. This is actually, I stole this screenshot from a convention, from a conference that was held about a year ago when they introduced this new feature for the first time. The feature is in development. It's not ready yet. It's not yet ready. But the point here is that they want to remove a lot of the boilerplate that we use today in order to use components. Because today, if we want to use another component, we need to import the class and also mention the selector in our files. And we need to give a selector for each component that we build. So the point of selectorless components is that you simply put the class name in your template and then you don't need a selector anymore. Now, if somebody has a deja vu from React, it's not accidental. So this is something that's in the working, and this is why they try to simplify the class names. It's still a work in progress. We'll see where it goes in the next version. But if you don't like the new file names, if you want to stick to the old file names, like me, by the way, then you can always add these schematics to your project, and that will maintain the original names so that when you ng generate a new component, you will have the .component extension, like we all learn to love. And that's it. All of these will be a part of a new course that is in development right now. I will release it sometimes in the next few months, hopefully before October, which discusses component authoring, highly customizable component authoring, specifically about custom directives, content projection, templates and structural directives, and dynamic components. So these new features will also be a part of this course. And that's it. So I hope you like the fact that version 20 is stable. You don't have to go through major upgrades. It's been a while since we had such a version, because all the last versions were part of the Renaissance and everything changes so dramatically. So it's nice to have one version where you can just lay back and just enjoy without having to make any dramatic migrations. And let's go open it up for Q&A. So let's just all right. So first of all, hi Mikhailo. thanks for the remarks. So should we expect some changes for Angular router in the scope of adoption zoneless API? I'm not quite sure about it. It's true that the router relies on RxJS. It's reactive router, but quite a lot of the router functionality has actually moved to signals. One of the new features, or not so new, but one of the features that was added about a year and a half ago was the ability to bind router parameters, router data, all the reactive values from the router to inputs. So you can now consume values from the router using signals. The only thing I think that's missing is the state of the router, things like busy. But apart from that, everything became functional and signal-based. So if you want to write maybe another message in the chat, if you want to point to a specific feature of the router that you would like to ask about, so I would love to hear that. But I do want to say one thing. Signals are for state, and when you think about the router, you think about the state of the router, the URL, the segment, the place, the parameters that are currently in effect. But sometimes you want to think about the router as a bunch of events, and you want to respond to events. And in that case, RxJS is still the best tool that you have. If time is part of the consideration, if you want to think about when things happened and respond to that, then I don't think that this will change in the near future, because RxJS is still the best tool to handle streams of events. I hope this answers your question, but I'm not quite sure. And Chaim, you say something about the CDK support for new binding and component portal soon. Actually, I'm not familiar with the portal component so much in the CDK. I did work with it a little bit, but I'm not familiar with binding issues there. But I am going to dedicate a little more time to CDK in one of the near in the near courses. But didn't get a chance to work with Portal too much. I think most of the work that I do is with dialogues and menus. Yeah, all right. And one more thing, ngDeep. Wow. Okay. So ngDeep it's a pain point. Yeah, one of the nice things about the new way that Angular Material customizes components is that it uses web tokens. And the good thing about web tokens is that they flow through the hierarchy of the components of the HTML. So you no longer need ngDeep in order to customize components. For example, if you want to apply styling on a component, on some part of internal component as part of the component that you use, then you can do it with web tokens now. And so ngDeep is not necessary for that. But having said that, there is a scenario that doesn't have any other solution apart from ngDeep. And that's when you want to style content, okay? Content projected. For example, let's say that you write a component that accepts some sort of input in the content and does something with it, or an image or an icon. So if you accept a content and you project it inside and you want to style it somehow, let's say you get an icon from the outside and you want to style it, the only way to do it is with ngDeep. There's absolutely no other way to do it, at least not that I'm aware of, unless you were willing to go through hoops. So for now, I don't think ngDeep is going to be deprecated anytime soon. The team has been trying to do that ever since version 2, and there seemed to be no good replacement for that. So I'm not so sure ngDeep is going anywhere. And maybe you will use it less, but you still need it for some scenarios. Okay. So any other question, guys? Okay, so guys, first of all, I want to thank you so much for taking part in this webinar, and also for your for taking the courses as well. I'd love to hear more remarks for you. You can always use the Q&A in Udemy as well, and I'm always really happy and excited to get questions, even ones that I need to do some research in order to answer. It really helps me to learn and to improve the courses. So thank you all for that. And hope to see you in future webinars as well. So bye for now.